My name is Nam, and to understand how my life led to tragedy, you need to go back to when I was 16. At that age, I was headstrong, impulsive, and often at odds with Thursday, a fellow student at our rural high school. She and I clashed from the moment we met, like fire and ice or cats and dogs, as people used to say. In our small hometown, we all attended the same classes year after year, so there was no escaping each other. At first, I had no idea what made her so frustrating to me. Maybe it was her quiet confidence, her refusal to laugh at my jokes, or how she excelled academically without trying. Meanwhile, I was the joker of the class, a bit rebellious, forever pranking people. My animosity toward Thursday bordered on obsession. I would do petty things, like loosen the screws on her bicycle seat so that it wobbled dangerously, or hide her notebooks. Just childish pranks, but it made her furious. She'd glare at me with annoyance, and I'd feel a twisted thrill at getting a reaction out of her. There was one time I actually broke her bicycle chain. Looking back, it's shameful. I remember the moment she discovered it, tears welling in her eyes, flustered because she was going to be late for an important after-school activity. At the time, I felt a surge of triumph that I could get under her skin. That's how immature and cruel I was. And yes, she hated me too. She'd call me the pest, the vermin, or the jerk, and soon our entire class teased us about how we were always at each other's throats. But behind that daily friction, hidden from everyone, was a spark I couldn't define. Our fights, ironically, were the only times I felt truly alive. As senior year approached, I never expected we'd cross paths again after graduation, let alone in a bigger city. I imagined we'd each move on to separate universities. But fate had other plans. 2 years later, I found myself at a city university 100 kilometers from home, renting a cramped room in a boarding house. I hardly recognized my life. No more farmland or family dinners. Instead, I had to figure out cheap meals and navigate lecture halls stuffed with hundreds of students. I missed home but also felt exhilarated by the sense of freedom. During orientation, my entire body froze when I spotted a familiar figure across the courtyard, Thursday. She wore a plain white t-shirt and jeans, scanning the crowd for someone. My heart jumped. In that split second, I flashed back to her outraged face whenever I pranked her. Then I looked around. Why was she here? This was my city, my campus, my new start. I half expected we'd avoid each other, but ironically, we ended up renting rooms in adjacent blocks of the same boarding complex. The irony was bitterly amusing. In a small new environment, we had few acquaintances from back home. Actually, we recognized each other at once. Over those first days, we pretended not to notice each other in the canteen or library. But occasionally, out of courtesy, we gave tiny nods in the hallway. The wariness in her eyes suggested she remembered every childish fight from high school. I tried to maintain my distance. Life was complicated enough without reigniting old rivalries. Yet something strange happened. After about 3 weeks, I realized we weren't kids anymore. She wasn't the same scowling teenager I used to sabotage. She was more thoughtful, calmer, with a quiet determination. Meanwhile, I had grown too, mellowing out from the rebellious jerk I once was. Our old enmity began to soften, replaced by a cautious civility. One evening, about a month into living in the boarding house, I heard a strange noise outside my door around midnight. It sounded like someone washing dishes, clinks of ceramic, splashes of water, directly in front of my room. At first, I dismissed it. Maybe a neighbor had a weird midnight cleaning habit. But it was so close, practically in front of my door, that I found it unsettling. I shrugged it off, too tired from a day of lectures to investigate. The next night, the noise returned, around the same time. This time, it continued for nearly 15 minutes, the repetitive clank of dishware, the faint shushing of water, like an invisible person doing chores in the middle of the corridor. I felt goosebumps. My mind darted to supernatural rumors, local ghosts, curses, restless spirits. Our rural upbringings had steeped us in ghost stories, after all. Finally, curiosity overcame me. I yanked open my door, flipping on the corridor light. To my shock, there was no one. No water, no dishes, just empty concrete. The hallway was silent, no sign of any disturbance. A chill crawled over my skin. I hurriedly shut my door again. The next morning, I knocked on Thursday's door, swallowing my pride. As soon as she answered, I asked, "Do you hear weird dishwashing sounds late at night?" Her eyes widened, and she nodded. "Yes, around midnight. I thought it was you. My heart sank. We both realized something beyond normal was going on. We decided to ask around. In the adjacent building, we encountered a friendly occupant named Kay. He was about our age, sharp-eyed, and seemingly more experienced in city life. Over tea at a roadside stall, we recounted the bizarre nightly noises. Kay gave us a long look, then asked, "When you two moved in, did you do any offerings or prayers to the local guardians of the land?" Thursday and I exchanged confused glances. We had no clue about city boarding house rituals. Kay sighed. In many old neighborhoods, especially if the land has some spiritual significance, you might get trouble if you don't do a small ceremony. Maybe that's what you're hearing at night, something unseen, letting you know you haven't asked permission to stay. We were skeptical, but also spooked. Kay offered to help us by joss sticks, fruit, incense, and taught us a simple ritual of lighting incense near the boarding house entrance, apologizing for not introducing ourselves properly, and requesting peace. It sounded superstitious, but given the weird noises, we thought, why not? So that evening, with Kay's guidance, we placed offerings near the corridor, said a short prayer, and even sprinkled salted water around. Remarkably, the next few nights were silent, no more dish noises. Thursday and I both felt immense relief. We also noticed how Kay had a certain aura, like he was used to dealing with spiritual matters. Jokingly, we asked if he was some kind of exorcist. He just smiled vaguely. During these days, with the tension of supernatural happenings behind us, Thursday and I drew closer. In the boarding house's communal courtyard, we'd run into each other picking up deliveries or heading to class. Our initial forced civility evolved into genuine warmth. We'd chat about the day's lectures, share comedic observations. The old grudges from high school began feeling childish. One late afternoon, I found her in the courtyard, frowning at her phone. She confessed her laptop had crashed right before an important assignment was due. My old impulse to sabotage was gone. I felt a genuine desire to help. I offered to let her use my laptop. She hesitated, remembering our past, but eventually agreed, following me up to my room. We spent hours working on her project, occasionally brushing shoulders as we shared the laptop. The tension was electric yet sweet. Over the next weeks, that closeness grew. We'd grab late-night snacks from a nearby vendor or catch a bus to campus together. The more we talked, the more I realized how dynamic, caring, and witty she was. She, in turn, saw that I had left behind some of my high school immaturity. Soon enough, I realized I was falling for her. Hard. One evening, as we strolled back from a night canteen, I gathered my courage. My heart pounded. "Thursday," I said, voice trembling. "I know we used to be enemies, but I care about you now. Maybe more than a friend." Her cheeks flushed. For a moment, she said nothing. My heart nearly seized. Then she admitted, "I've grown to care about you too. It's strange after all our fights, but I feel safe with you now." That night, we officially decided to date. We became inseparable, sharing laughter about how ironically we'd started with sabotaged bicycles and ended in each other's arms. I was blissfully happy. But our new romance wasn't welcome news to everyone. We learned that Kay, the same neighbor who helped us with the spiritual offering, also harbored feelings for Thursday. He'd apparently known her from a campus club and had developed a crush. He had tried to confess to her a few times, but she politely turned him down, explaining she was already in a relationship, namely with me. Kay didn't take the rejection well. He started avoiding us in the corridors. Where once he'd greet us warmly, now he gave curt nods or locked himself in his room. Something in his expression turned cold, almost resentful. Occasionally, I caught him glaring my way. My instincts prickled with caution, but I tried to brush it off. People get upset after rejections, right? I figured he'd move on eventually. But I underestimated the depth of his bitterness. Because Kay, we soon discovered, was the son of a powerful local medium or Thayfap, someone rumored to dabble in spells and darker magics. People in the neighborhood whispered that Kay inherited some knowledge of occult practices, though no one had proof. He had apparently used that knowledge to guide us in the Kung by ceremony. The question was, how far would he go to manipulate these forces for personal gain? One weekend, Kay made a seemingly benign gesture. He brought Thursday and me some bubble tea. He knocked on my door around noon, holding 2 tall cups, smiling oddly. "Hey, I just wanted to congratulate you two on your relationship. No hard feelings. I recall feeling a bit uneasy at that grin, but Thursday accepted the drink graciously. She thanked him. I was about to say no, but Thursday elbowed me, so I shrugged and accepted it politely. We sipped the bubble tea inside my room, chatting about random stuff. However, after finishing half of hers, Thursday suddenly grew restless, complaining of a weird taste. My own cup tasted normal. She set it aside, looking pale. I assumed maybe she was just tired. She insisted she was fine. Kay had already left. The remainder of the day, she seemed strangely distant. At one point, she texted me from her room that she couldn't sleep, feeling fidgety. That night, I expected she'd come watch a movie with me as usual, but she texted again, "I'm feeling too restless, might walk around outside." My gut churned with worry, so I offered to accompany her, but she said no. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe she needed personal space. Yet something about it all felt wrong. The next morning, we planned to ride to campus together. Typically, we'd chat and joke on the motorbike. But she sat behind me in silence. Her arms around my waist felt limp, not hugging me as usual. When I tried to ask if something was wrong, she gave half answers, seeming distracted. At campus, I had a departmental meeting, so I told her I'd meet her by the cafeteria afterward. However, she texted me around lunch, cryptic, "I'm leaving early. Don't wait for me." Concern flared. What was happening? While heading home, I got a frantic message from a mutual friend. Something terrible happened. Thursday got into an accident. My entire world blurred. I raced to the hospital address provided. On arrival, they told me her motorbike had swerved off the road into a ditch. She was unconscious, in critical condition. I was stunned. The doctors worked to save her. I sat outside the operating room, trembling. But the heartbreak was merciless. A nurse later explained she didn't make it. Just like that, she was gone from this world. In the corridor, everything became numb. This was the woman I'd finally grown to love, who had turned from an enemy to a cherished partner, and now she was dead. I retreated from city life. With Thursday's sudden death, I lost the will to continue classes. My academic performance plummeted. I drank heavily, locked in sorrow. I returned to my hometown, dropping out of college altogether. Some relatives tried to comfort me, but the emptiness was too vast. Then, on the 49th day after her passing, a significant day in local spiritual beliefs, I had a vivid dream. In it, Thursday appeared, wearing the same clothes from the day she died, tears in her eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice was faint. I recall her saying, "Nom, I was cursed. Someone gave me a love spell that turned poisonous when I refused them." She gestured in anguish. My chest felt heavy. I tried to ask who, but the dream ended abruptly. I woke in a cold sweat, her words echoing, "I was cursed. Someone gave me a love spell." The next day, I pieced it together. Could Kay have used some twisted magic from his father's craft? My mind replayed the timeline. Kay was furious at her rejection, then gave bubble tea. That night, she felt restless, like a zombie, she'd said. The next day, she had her fatal accident. A swirl of guilt and rage overtook me. I blamed myself for letting Kay near her. If only I had realized sooner how malicious he was. But the damage was done. She was gone. Nothing would bring her back. My heartbreak merged with a bone-deep bitterness at Kay's possible involvement. Meanwhile, I prayed for Thursday's soul to find peace. As the weeks turned into months, I sank into a dark place. My mother worried. My father tried to nudge me into seeing a therapist. I refused. I was haunted not only by my grief, but by a sense that Thursday's spirit was near, tethered by injustice. Late at night, I'd hear faint sobs or sense a presence, as if she hovered at the edge of my consciousness. One night, I jolted awake to see a silhouette in my room. My heart jumped. Thursday? She wore a sorrowful expression, lips parted like she wanted to speak. Then she vanished. I sat up, chest heaving. The experience felt real, not just a dream. Something about her eyes conveyed longing, regret, or anger. Possibly all three. Meanwhile, rumors reached me that Kay was still continuing his life in the city, smug and unaffected. I heard he was boasting about some mystical powers inherited from his father. But no one dared confront him. My anger simmered, yet I was powerless. Thursday's spirit apparently wasn't resting either. Time marched on, and eventually, my family tried to nudge me toward returning to normalcy. Reluctantly, I attempted to rebuild. A year after Thursday's passing, I re-enrolled in a local college, trying to salvage an education. I met a new girl named Lon, sweet, intelligent, patient with my emotional scars. We started dating quietly. Yet strange phenomena began. Each time Lon and I grew close, an unexplainable rift formed. We'd argue over trivial things. At night, Lon reported terrifying dreams, a female ghost warning her to stay away from Nom or you'll be cursed. She described the ghost as a young woman with vacant eyes, wearing a white dress. My blood ran cold. That had to be Thursday. Perhaps her spirit, anguished by Kay's black magic, latched onto me in death. Now she was jealous or protective, driving away any new romance. Lon became increasingly fearful, eventually telling me she couldn't continue. She worried that the nightmares would consume her. One day, she gave me back a ring I'd gifted her, tears in her eyes.
I'm sorry. Nam.
I can't live with a spirit threatening me every night. My heart cracked anew, feeling once again the sting of losing someone I cared about, albeit under wholly different circumstances. Desperate, I turned to an old local medium near my hometown, a man named Master Fook, who'd helped some families with exorcisms or spiritual matters. I told him everything, Thursday's death, the dream about a curse, and how her ghost now haunted me and my new love interests. He listened gravely, stroking his gray beard. This spirit is restless, overshadowed by wrongdoing, yet also strongly attached to you. If indeed black magic was involved in her final days, her soul might be bound, resentful, or confused. Master Fook suggested a release ceremony, which required me and my new girlfriend, if I had one, to wear protective amulets. But Lon had already left. So it was just me, wearing a special bracelet he'd made from braided red thread. We tried a ceremony at my house, chanting prayers for Thursday's soul to move on. But halfway through, a gust of wind slammed the windows, blowing out the candles. Master Fook's brow furrowed. Her spirit is powerful and angry. Something is blocking her from letting go. He ended the session early, shaking his head. We may need a second approach. This might not be easy. Over time, rumors spread that I was haunted by a vengeful lover. Neighbors gossiped. Late-night footsteps echoed in my house, presumably Thursday's restless spirit. I was spiraling into despair, seeking a rational solution but finding none. My mother pleaded for me to see a more powerful exorcist in a distant province, but I lacked the funds and the energy. News reached me that Kay had grown in occult prowess, rumored to help some shady individuals with love spells or curses. My anger at him never dimmed. He was the root cause of Thursday's tragedy, my tragedy. I wanted to confront him, demand he undo whatever he had done. But I feared if he truly had that power, a direct confrontation might unleash something worse. One night, I dreamt of Thursday again. This time, she whispered, he bound me to you. I can't leave. I can't find peace. I jerked awake, tears streaming. That explained the ghostly visits. The black magic Kay used effectively tied her spirit to me in a twisted nether state. She was both lost and clinging to me. My heartbreak deepened. Finally, I resolved to face Kay. I traveled back to the city, found the old boarding house we once inhabited. Kay was still there, living in the same unit. When he saw me outside, he sneered, unaffected. I confronted him, voice shaking with rage. You used black magic on Thursday, didn't you? Why? His smile was chilling. She was mine to claim. She refused me, so I made sure no one else would have her. And you, what right did you have to step in? My fists trembled. She died, you maniac. He shrugged. Her spirit's bound now. Not my concern if it took a lethal turn. My blood boiled. I wanted to throttle him, but I also recognized that physically attacking him might lead to something far worse. Kay stepped back, eyes flashing. Leave it alone, or you'll regret it. He turned and vanished into his room. The encounter confirmed my worst suspicions. He was not merely misguided, he was monstrous, intentionally cursing the woman I loved. I returned to Master Fook, explained Kay's malicious confession. Master Fook sighed. To break such a curse, we must do a strong reversal ceremony. But the spirit also needs closure from the one who cast it. That meant I had to persuade Kay to relinquish the spell. The notion was grim. Meanwhile, Thursday's ghost grew more agitated. My nights were plagued by eerie illusions, doors opening by themselves, her voice whispering sorrowful laments, sometimes morphing into angry screeches. My new attempts at dating all failed once they sensed the dark aura around me. Eventually, Master Fook agreed to do a large-scale ritual, but Kay refused to participate. Despite that, Master Fook arrived at my old city boarding house yard, chanting prayers, burning special incenses, reading from old texts. I felt a swirl of energies. But halfway through, a furious wind circled us. The candles flickered out. Master Fook's eyes were wide with alarm. She's too bound by resentment. The curse is anchored in Kay's will. I cannot break it alone. He ended with a final incantation of protection for me, apologizing that he could not free Thursday's spirit. I was heartbroken. From that day, Thursday's ghost turned more vengeful. She'd appear at night, scolding me for not avenging her, for letting Kay roam free. She'd scream in a voice that cracked with sorrow, "If you can't free me, no other woman shall claim your heart." True to her words, every attempt at romance crumbled. My potential girlfriends had horrific nightmares or felt a sickening presence whenever they approached me intimately. One by one, they fled, leaving me more isolated. While all this happened, a bizarre rumor circulated in the city university where I had once studied. A group of 5 students adventured into an abandoned wing of campus at dusk, only to encounter the spirit of a pregnant girl in white. She had presumably died years ago by suicide after a scandal. They heard footsteps, water dripping, and encountered her spectral form in a corridor. The school locked that entire wing to keep people away. As haunted as I was by my personal tragedy, I found eerie parallels. Another young woman's spirit, trapped by heartbreak or despair, lashing out at unsuspecting students. The city seemed to be full of restless souls. It only drove home how real the spirit world could be. Years have slid by. I remain single, reclusive, seldom venturing out. The heartbreak of losing Thursday, the guilt that I couldn't protect her from Kay's lethal curse, and the oppressive presence of her restless ghost made normal life impossible. Some nights, I sense her in the room. She looms in corners, face a blur of grief. She might whisper my name, "Nom, help me," or "Why didn't you save me?" Sometimes she unleashes screams, rattling objects on shelves. I dread bedtime, uncertain whether I'll see the sorrowful Thursday or the raging poltergeist. My mother's attempts at further ceremonies fizzled out. Kay remains unrepentant, continuing his life, presumably dabbling in more dark spells. I loathe him, but confronting him again feels suicidal. Master Fook insists that, without Kay's direct reversal, Thursday's spirit can't fully be freed. Friends from high school marvel at how I've changed from the brash trickster who once sabotaged bikes. Now I'm a haunted shell of that person. People keep their distance, as if sensing a cursed aura. I slip deeper into depression, yet ironically, Thursday's spirit is always near me, never letting me forget her presence. She has become both my torment and my only link to the love I once cherished. Sometimes I question everything. If only I had confronted Kay sooner or recognized the danger in that bubble tea. If only I had persuaded Thursday not to ride alone that day. The regrets coil inside me. Yet a faint glimmer remains. Perhaps there is a future where I find a more potent master capable of severing Kay's curse. Perhaps Thursday's soul might be released and ascend peacefully. Until then, she stays with me, overshadowing any attempt at normalcy. Lon, the last girlfriend who left me, occasionally messages to ask if I'm all right. She's still spooked. She told me she has nightmares about a furious woman in white, cursing her to misery if she tries reuniting with me. Lon begs me to fix the situation, but how? My entire life is pinned under the weight of this curse. At times, I wander aimlessly at night, hoping Thursday's spirit might appear in a calmer state so I can reason with her. I speak softly to the empty air, "I'm sorry. If I'd known, I'd have saved you. Let me help you find peace." Occasionally, I sense a flicker of tenderness in the shadows, but soon it warps into wailing or vanishes in sorrow. The push-pull heartbreak, part of her ghost wanting closure, another part consumed by anger from Kay's black magic. And Kay? He's soared academically, rumor has it. Some say he has a fiancée, ironically living a seemingly untroubled life. Once in a while, I hear mention that people in the city avoid crossing him for fear of his father's, and thus his spiritual might. I harbor fantasies of confronting him physically or exposing him, but I lack proof. It's not like I can walk into a police station proclaiming, "He used black magic to kill Thursday." They'd laugh me out. So I remain silent, enduring. Thus, my existence is overshadowed by two tragic ghost stories: the pregnant campus girl haunting the locked corridor, and my beloved Thursday, the girl who died after a cursed bubble tea. The city seems rife with restless souls. In this modern age of cell phones and bustling nightlife, it's ironic how intangible forces can still bind us so cruelly. I no longer sabotage people's bicycles. I sabotage my own future by clinging to guilt. I no longer laugh easily. My face is etched with sorrow. Each day, I pray for a miracle, for some ritual or chance encounter that might break Kay's lethal magic, allowing Thursday's spirit to ascend. People might call me superstitious or delusional, but they haven't glimpsed the spectral figure drifting through my bedroom at midnight, tears streaming from hollow eyes. Occasionally, I pass by a reflection in a storefront window, noticing how hollow I look, a man in his mid-20s, stooped by unseen burdens. My parents fret that I'll never marry, never have a normal life. They aren't wrong. Thursday's ghost has indeed made it impossible for me to move on. In quiet moments, I wonder if she is truly punishing me, or if her tortured soul simply cannot let go. A terrifying thought arises: perhaps if I died, we'd both be together in the afterlife. But that's a dark path I hesitate to tread. In fleeting glimpses, I see a chance for closure. If I could muster the courage to challenge Kay, force him to undo his dark arts, perhaps that would free Thursday. But what if he refuses? What if he's grown too powerful? My illusions of confronting him waver. So I remain stuck in limbo, as does she. No matter what, Thursday's story stands as a cautionary tale. She was so young, so full of love, and by fate or cruelty, she was ensnared by an evil that took her life. My heartbreak is daily. The nightmarish presence of her restless soul is constant. And Kay? He remains an enigma, a living testament that sometimes evil goes unpunished. Sometimes I reflect on the first portion of our story, how we hated each other as kids, how we ended up in the same city, how we overcame that hatred and discovered love. That fleeting happiness was the brightest moment of my life. Then it was extinguished, overshadowed by black magic and a tragic accident. The contrast is almost too painful to bear. When I hear about other campus ghost sightings, like the story of the pregnant student who roams corridors, or the haunting wails in locked academic wings, I empathize more than I ever thought possible. Because I too am haunted, my life shaped by the intangible realm that seldom surfaces in modern conversation but can devastate you all the same. I wonder if, in some parallel dimension, Thursday and I are happily finishing our degrees, planning a future together. But in this reality, I'm weighed down by her spirit, my sorrow, and the knowledge that a malignant person orchestrated it all. Such is the cruelty of fate. I write this testimony not for pity, but to warn that the unseen can claim your life in ways you can't imagine. I used to brush off superstitions, only giving them heed when that weird dishwashing noise plagued us in the boarding house. If not for Kay stepping in and teaching us how to ask permission, maybe I'd have remained ignorant of how potent spiritual forces can be. Yet it was Kay's further knowledge of black magic that proved the deadliest. My beloved Thursday fell victim, her gentle soul chained to me in a tormented afterlife. And I, once a callous prankster, am left to face the consequences of a single curse that snatched away our happiness. I no longer have illusions of a normal future. If the day ever comes that I stumble upon a master exorcist who can sever Kay's vile binding, I'll do anything to see Thursday freed. But that day remains uncertain, a faint glimmer in a sea of gloom. Perhaps my story can serve as a lesson. There is darkness in the world. Sometimes it's intangible, lurking behind the everyday hustle. And sometimes, heartbreak can manifest in spectral form, refusing to let go. For me, all that's left is an ongoing struggle to release a soul bound by resentment, longing, and black magic. A tragedy that began with teenage hatred, blossomed into love, and ended in supernatural ruin. And so I remain, a lonely man overshadowed by the ghost of the girl who once melted my heart. The campus corridors that hush at dusk, the bubble tea that once brought death, the memory of her final smile as she rode off that morning, it all lingers, forging a haunting legacy that refuses to fade.